So I'm very, very, very excited about this topic tonight. It is a bit controversial. I've already gotten some emails with people's opinions, which I promptly ignore. But I wanted to open this conversation up because I think that there's so much here and there's so much going on in the world with women. And again, I was just at the USAHAVAs a week and a half ago too. I can't remember. And there's just so much happening with like the empowerment of women and, you know, curiosity about the stories of the women Mandali. And so I want to preface this with anybody who's listening, that, you know, I think that it needs to be said that not everything that's going to be said here is fact or what Baba said, because I know that we can get a lot into, oh, did Baba say this? Did Baba say that? And that's not so much what I want to make this night about. Of course, like if you've got stuff that Baba has said and, you know, like share it, but it's more like I'm interested in what your intuitive thoughts are and feelings are about the role that women are playing, because it's definitely far different than the role that women have played in past Avataric advents. So I'm gonna pull up the email just because I put a couple of examples of things that I thought were really interesting. Oh boy, hold on. I have to find the role of women. Can I have a volunteer who wants to read?
Okay, Jai Baba. This is a topic I have been wanting to do for some time, but didn't quite know how to spearhead it properly. With the help of Jeff and some other lovely folks, I'm going to give it a try. I do want to preface it with my intention for this topic. I hope to make this a safe space where all feel comfortable expressing their own speculations or intuitive feelings about the work Baba was doing with the women. I know there are no particular answers to these questions, but feel there is much to be contemplated and discussed. I encourage everyone to share any feelings or thoughts they may have and ask that all accept these with love, just as personal observations. It cannot be argued that women played a tremendous role in Baba's work. In this Avataric advent, he spent a large chunk of his time and attention focused on the women. There are so many levels to this. I'm often fascinated with all the various ways Baba divided the women up or the work delegated to them. I want to give you all a list of some of the things I have noticed just to get your minds spinning. Feel free to stray off to what I come up with here. Mera, she is my very breath without which I cannot live. Baba lifted Mera and highlighted just how important she was to, I guess there should be a she there, was to him.
Yeah, these are just notes. I apologize.
No worries. Keeping Mera away from any male contact for a large majority of her life. Her suffering was equal to his in the accident in Oklahoma. At the accident site, when the ambulance arrived, Baba told them to go to Mera before himself. Mera's unrelenting grief after Baba dropped the body. Baba having Mera stand on the porch and greeting the men Mandali for the first time in 1968. Baba referring to her as the representation of Maya, purest soul in the universe. Money, chairwoman of the trust, her balance of feminine and masculine energy. Said to have her last life before being one of the perfect masters. Her role to care for Mera, her childlike cheerfulness, the least injured in the Oklahoma accident. The Western women. Most of the Western women were heavily involved in the world in some way or of some high social status. Women were appointed to find, establish, and run his home in the West, Meher's spiritual center. The Eastern women. Baba lived in the house with them rather than with the men. Thoughts on the women in the early days, Gulmai, Shireen, etc. The women in general. The women's shrines are on Upper Mehrabad Hill with Baba, while the men in Lower Mehrabad. The accident in the West was only with women. Some traveling in Baba's life was exclusively with the women, while others with the men. The exclusivity of the guest house or Mera's bed in Merazad, and no such places for any of the men, etc. This is just a short list of some of the things that interest me. Can you move up a little, Margi?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay. This is something that takes up much of my focus and fascinates me deeply. So I cannot wait to hear all of you I cannot wait to hear all you feel or speculate about Baba's work in the world and empowerment of the feminine. In his love, Margi and Peter.
Thank you, Go Hair. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So there's one more thing I just want to read before we get started, which I'm sorry, I will try to figure out what book it's from, but somebody sent me this excerpt of basically like a compiled observation of Baba's work. It's not what Baba said. It's no reference from Baba's words, but just some food for thought about, the role of the women. Okay. When the inevitable conflicts and even quarrels arose, Baba did not seek to damp them down. On the contrary, he would allow them to develop and then call those involved together and face them with the situation, often compelling them to speak out and say what they thought of one another. Only then, when everything had been brought into the open, would he resolve the conflict. If you cannot love each other, then learn to give in, he told them, and in course of giving in, they found they did come to love each other. Some of them still share common life and a common devotion nearly 40 years later. What we must suppose to have been the purpose behind these persistent efforts to unite two groups of women, the Western and the Eastern, who in upbringing and outlook were first such poles apart. Did Baba give so freely of his time and energy in order that some half a dozen Western women should learn a deeper outlook on the world, and that an equal number of the East, albeit those closest to him, should assimilate and experience and develop the capacity to cope with the material world, which distinguishes the West? It was Baba's way, and it is to be said, wow, this wording is bad, sorry. It was Baba's way, and it is to be said that the practice of all perfect masters is to work out in their lifetimes on small scales, models for developments which will later become worldwide. Throughout his life, Baba constantly emphasized the importance of women and the values particularly associated with her: love, tenderness, service to others, stressing them not as to be something demanded of women by man for his enjoyment or advantage, but as qualities he must value in her and develop within himself. So in bringing the groups together with such patience and determination, Baba was perhaps, for all attempts to interpret are only guesswork, achieving three aims at the same time among perhaps many others. He was sowing the seeds of a unity between East and West. He was stressing the importance of women for the coming age, and he was helping to develop a pattern of what kind of woman she would be, one in whom the talent, the energy, and the practical capacity of the Westerners would be blended with the devotion and spirituality of the women Mandali. Woman has to be liberated, not in order to become man's imitation or enslaver, but to become something new, something more than she has ever been until now, and in doing so, to inspire man to become more than he has ever thought of being, more than he has ever been willing to become. Her role, following that of Baba himself, is to awaken. So I just wanted to open it up with that and then open the floor, just because I find that passage is so beautiful, because it really highlights what I feel is to be so much of Baba's work. But I'm going to turn it over to you guys with speculations or questions that we can maybe talk about, because this is a very, very rich topic. Does anyone have anything they want to jump out with, or that on that list really caught their eye? How about Diane and Terry? They always have something to say.
Ooh, this is so embarrassing because I don't feel like I've grasped what you're I was asking Terry for clarity. And then you called on me and
Oh, that's okay. No, that's probably good. It probably means that I'm not expressing myself clearly enough and that I need to speak with more clarity. I think my goal for the chat tonight is just to bring out some of the personal feelings that people have of the work that Baba did with women. And then some of the things they've noticed and how maybe they're changing in the world. And just bring that conversation to how important the women Mandali were in Baba's advent. Did that sum it up okay?
That's really good. And as an ex-radical feminist, I might have a few thoughts. But, you know, I have looked at that aspect of how they're all buried with him and all the different stories, although there was a little factoid in there in your email I didn't know about. I didn't realize that Mare met the men while Baba was still in his body in 1960. So thank you very much for that. But I've always been a little confused about how mistreated women have been from, I think, any recorded history. There was, I don't think, a recorded matriarch that oppressed the men, but it's been a universe of the opposite. Yet, so maybe was what Baba was doing by putting the women so important during this Advent, maybe he was changing the energy so that that there would be less incredible oppression and aggressive misogyny.
Yeah. No, I love you saying that, because that's really, I don't want to make this a conversation like we hate the patriarchy kind of thing, but more of like, how amazing is it that this is what's happening now, right? This is the switch of just the empowerment of the masculine to now the balancing of the feminine, right? And the reason I wanted to read that passage too is because it's not about women becoming like men. It's about the empowerment of the feminine and like honoring the values of nurturance, love, and tenderness that are coming in the world as actually spiritual attributes. But we can't, oh, sorry.
I'll share, you know, when I came to Baba, it was a very, I mean, if you have been in this house, so you know that I think there are still more goddesses in the house than there are pictures of Baba, or maybe they're about equal, but there's a lot. And when I saw Baba for the first time in a photograph, I just felt, to me, that he was the mother, the father, the sister, the brother. Like he just seemed, I don't know, it was a feeling. It wasn't, you know, anything else. And then when I got more involved with Baba, the attraction for me, besides him blasting my heart open, was the fact that he felt connected to strong women and strong men, also with intelligence and poetry and ghazals. And he really switched it up in so many ways for me, that as a gay person, I felt safe. As a woman, I felt safe. It was pretty amazing. And so to me, his community involved us all and took us all in. And that was what was so incredibly attractive to me.
Yeah.
I know, you know, there are rules and regulations and the sinners and the saints, and we all, you know, break some of the rules, and we all go through life doing things really beautifully and the way Baba would like us to, and all of that stuff. However, I really believe that he honored all of us in one way or another. And I think I went from being a feminist when I met Baba to becoming a humanist.
Mm.
And in
That's
all
really
that, not that I didn't have nice men in my life, but right now I would say that my biggest circle is of the male population. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. No, that's really beautiful. I love what you said, because I personally, I feel that Baba did so much work with the women, not to make women, to turn things into a matriarchy, because that would be the same thing, just reverse that we're in now, but to create the equality and then balancing of the masculine and feminine. I find it so interesting about how even Don Stevens, how he said he was a near perfect balance of masculine and feminine, and emphasizing how important that is. But let's go to Rich.
This I think is a difficult topic, at least for older guys like myself. But I don't think it's political at all. And the reason I say this, because Baba was not political at all. But a couple years ago, I guess, I started reading the Blue Bus Tours, and I think it's a phenomenal book, but it made me aware of how deliberate and how tough, I mean really tough, Baba was with the women on those journeys. This is not vacation trip time. This was nitty-gritty, hardcore, and the only one that could keep up appearances at all was the mother of Ronald, and her name was Estelle Caudell Gailey, called her Nani, and she was a brilliant American lawyer from New York City who was about retired, and she went through the whole thing, and she always had her dress on and appropriately attired in the middle of all that dust and rubble that they, it was really, it's got to read that book. That's a page burner. But and then she died in India with Bob after that, But anyway, moving on. The part of this, I was reading, believe it or not, an astrology book about the Yanni. And we don't have good terms for this in America or in the English language because the literature may be too masculine or something, or patriarchal. But the Yanni, I love the word the Yanni, although I don't understand it in depth, like Margi might, or some of you might. But this passage was about what the power is in certain aspects. And this particular one was, she stated it in terms that I'd never quite grasped before, but that women have the ability to turn intuition into practical reality with other people. And men, I don't think that men are going to have to move that in that direction. And that's a truly, truly important thing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Rich. And I'm glad you're getting the ball rolling in this conversation, because those are the kind of things that I think are just really important to talk about, because it looks so much different. Even what I find so fascinating, and I can speak from my personal experiences, I hated Mara for a very large chunk of my life. Really, really hated her. Like, didn't want to look at her. She was just a reminder of how, Baba says he loves Mara above everyone else, above all else, right? And she's perfect. She's the purest soul in the universe. And my feeling was, oh, I can never measure up, right? Like, I can do everything. I can give my life to Baba and I'll never be Mara. I'll never be enough. And then I had a really profound experience with Mara in India, which has kind of continued to create this relationship with her, where Baba really lifted Mara up as in importance, right? Not that she's just another Mandali, and not that there's just another Mandali, but that her role, without her, his work could not have been done. And I find that so interesting, because that's not really the case with the other avatars. I mean, of course, maybe when they were living, that was the message, and it was construed by society, which is a very common thing that happens. But there has to be note of just how important Mara was. And I would love to hear stories of your experience with Mara, because personally I believe that she's just the divine feminine side of God. I'm gonna keep talking. Oh, good. Okay, we got Ken with his hand up.
Okay, but I told my Mara stories and they're on my video. But one question and one comment. Margie, do you know Jean Adriel's story?
No.
She wrote the book Avatar. She was one of the first Western women. And from what I've heard second, third hand, was that she was jealous of Mara, basically. She wanted to be Mara. And she ended up leaving Baba in later years because she thought this other guru would give her realization. But in the end, people that visited her in the hospital said that she had come back to Baba in a sense, or had never really left. But just what you said made me think of that. So maybe your gene come back. Anyway, this, the question is, you know, I've often thought, but Baba did say that women would do his work in the West. And of course, we have Elizabeth and Kitty founding the center, and Narina, and then Jane Haynes taking over, and then really Barbara being the main person for many, many years. And I sort of have a feeling why that would be a good thing or necessary maybe, or why a woman could do it in a way that a man couldn't. But when I try to pinpoint it, I can't quite really explain it. So I was wondering, maybe someone else has some thoughts or ideas about that. Why women in the West at this particular time are better at serving in that egoless way, maybe, or being more welcoming to everyone. Something along those lines, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken, for sharing that, because I think that's a really beautiful, and it's obvious too, you know, there are some things with Baba where you can be like, oh, maybe it wasn't really the case. I don't know, but it's obvious. Baba had, and even most of the Western women who were involved with Baba were very, very like, I mean, think about Margaret. She was a dancer for the ballet, right? Elizabeth was a very distinguished woman, or even Narina. They're not, you know, your average American kind of like housewife, right? And not that there's anything wrong with that. I celebrate that. But it's just interesting how that archetype is what Baba used for his work in the West. And maybe there'll be more conversations that'll come from that. But let's go to Josh.
Can you hear me all right? I'm in a bit of a noisy place.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, because I hear some people saying that, you know, they wouldn't call themselves, you know, an ardent radical feminist anymore. I myself, as a diehard Baba lover, still do call myself like a radical, like diehard radical feminist, you know, like I believe women are the superior gender. That's my perception. And I'm open to being wrong about everything, but yeah. And, you know, I see that when Baba was telling people like no one's allowed to even touch Mahara, I see it almost like as this recognition of how sacred women are and how powerful women are and how incredible and amazing they are, that, you know, that other people can't even go like anywhere near them, you know. And I mean, just take a look at the tomb. I feel like surrounded by all the women Baba lovers, and then the men Baba lovers all the way down at the bottom of the hill. It's like, could they be like, I definitely feel that a lot of his work is around the heart, and naturally I think that women are a lot more keyed into their hearts than men, you know. So I really, yeah, I'd really love to hear how other people relate to Baba and femininity, you know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's Baba was very clear about who the best Baba lover was, you know. Our highest example is Mahara. That's our highest example, and, you know, she's sort of like this feminine embodiment. So yeah, for me it's very clear that women are front and center.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you sharing that. But so, you know, it's something that I would really love to hear from men and what your experience of this is, because I think the body is irrelevant, right? What body we're in. It's the energy that we carry. And, you know, we reincarnate, we go back and forth to have equal samskaras so that we can level out. And so it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman in this lifetime. It's the energy that you bring into the world. But I will say, as a woman, something that it actually hurts my heart. This is not in a way that I'm coming off as like saying there's something wrong with men, but I've noticed that the grip of the male ego seems to be a lot stronger than the grip of the feminine ego. And I would love to hear from men what that brings up in you, because I'm not, what I've just seen is that I think maybe societally women are kind of taught to give in and men are not. And so it creates that relationship with the ego that we really don't have to combat as much. And maybe I feel like I'm saying things that are controversial, but I think it's worth talking about and getting the conversation out there in a spiritual way, not a political. So did I piss anybody off by saying that yet? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, we'll go to Lauren.
I would just add maybe to
Yeah,
that
like a lot of guys.
question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Just would add to that, well-timed, Josh, but that I think we are often somehow we just intuitively learn that we can't take up space, we can't be loud. And I think some of the deepest spiritual work that I've overcome is that, kind of like just kind of physical inability to take up space or be loud. And so if Baba is like creating space for the women to take up space, at his samadhi, I think that's very, powerful. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a really cool topic.
Yeah, thank you so
Very
much.
powerful. Yeah.
And I would love to hear more from you if anything else pops up, because I think as a woman who has to do work in being okay with taking up space, it's so much of the work that Baba did with the women was honoring their personalities too, which I think is so key. Is all of the women Mandali had very interesting personalities and quirks. And that was never broken or taken away from them, which is something that historically has been taken away from women. They would read, they would make music, they would dance, they would laugh, all of these things. They weren't quiet women. But let's go to Anthony.
I'll figure out the unmute here. Yeah, it's interesting how I remember Baba reading, saying something somewhere that in the West, the women were more spiritual, and over in the East, it was the men. I don't know if anyone else remembers hearing him say that, but it's interesting that he put women in such a profound role in his, where he set up shop in the West here. And I mean, America's kind of like the epicenter of like the crazy Western culture, and it's so tilted toward the masculine patriarchal energy here. So I feel like so much of our spiritual work in the West over here is overcoming that sense of ego and competition and all of that. And it just, to me, it makes sense that Baba would, I don't know, almost like set up like an emphasis on, paying attention to those who would be taking us away from, God, let me see if I'm putting this right. It's, I guess just like to steer away from that mind state, we do have to embrace the feminine more. And I mean, I know going to school, growing up, I mean, I found males the hardest to be around. I mean, that was who you felt like was sizing you up all the time, and, fights and competition. And, I went to school in a pretty crazy setting with gangs and stuff like that around. And, that's a pretty heavy masculine energy. And I don't know, it's just like you're trying to get away from that. You're trying to find your heart. You're trying to find your connection to nature. You're trying to, find your connection to music. And I mean, all those things to me represent feminine qualities. So I just think so much of our path in the West, especially in America, is trying to counterbalance the heavy, masculine energy that, unfortunately has really caused a lot of harm in the country here. So I don't know, that's kind of my take on it a little bit.
Yeah, I so appreciate you coming out and sharing that. But can I ask you, as a man in the West, how have you gone about developing those attributes of the feminine?
Honestly, I think of a lot of it sort of deepening for me, really, when I started taking a lot more time to be by myself. I found like when I was around crowds and people, the sway of the influence of those other energies is so powerful. It's hard to find your way. And when I started spending time alone and reading and getting deeper into music and going out and kayaking and started doing that and really seriously making time for that every week, I just started to tap into that alone, and it was just such a draw to it, to where I want to be out in nature. I want to be, playing music. I want to be in that private space to cultivate that. And so I don't know. I think that was my biggest thing, was just getting away from crowds and getting away from people and being out in nature and being alone to write and play music and read poetry and, be in that space. So.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your openness. And I also encourage men to share just as much as women tonight. But with that, let's go to Gail, and maybe Kippy has something to say.
Kippy is long asleep. When I came to Baba, I was, I guess, in my 40s, and my real experience with growing, becoming a feminist was at a Quaker college. And there, women's studies, we stood for women and not against men. And so it was never they're bad and they're the enemy. And so coming to Baba, it was natural. And, one of the things you always heard people say about was Baba was natural. And he was natural with the women. And he decided when he wanted Mara to speak to the men, and that was scary for her because she had not been around men. And it's a comfortable community. I feel comfortable with the men in the Baba community. I don't ever, unless somebody comes out and says something, and I haven't had that happen, and I'm sure there are Baba guys, I guess, who are not very enlightened. I feel like I look for the best and I get the best. I feel like nobody's trying to dominate or that kind of thing, men and women. Some people have a dominant type of personality, but it's not against women. And I just feel that comes from Baba, is all the things that we've said. He let women be women. He let people have leadership roles. But it was people, and he loved people. And that helps me with the men in the Baba community. I haven't ever thought about it before, but I think Baba he was very clear that Mara was the person in the world who loved him the most. And that's established. And thank you guys for being nice guys. Jai Baba.
Thank you so much, Gail. I appreciate that so much. It's something that I would be curious to know people's feelings about, maybe particularly the men, that, in almost all other religions, that there are lots of things that women are excluded from, I'm thinking like, especially the Muslim religion, right? Women can't go into mosques. And I find it so interesting that Baba's advent, there are things that men can't do. And if there's I'm so grateful to be a woman and love Baba, because I can bow down to Mara's bed, I can stay in a guest house, things like that. And I wonder if that, and if that creates a feeling of you guys not being included ever, or if there's an understanding of why Baba's doing that, and what's the word? Just an acceptance of that's how it should be, or there's reason for it, I guess, is kind of maybe what's coming to mind. But I'd be interested. Maybe Tony has something to say about it. Oh, he raised his hand. Perfect. I was intuiting it. That feminine intuition.
Well, about being excluded from certain things. I think there's something else I want to say, but I want to respond to what you just triggered. Um, women, only women staying in the guest house and bowing to Mara's bed there and all that. Baba was clearly carving out certain things that this is for you alone because you are something special and unique. And women, because women are associated more with love and with the heart qualities, Baba said. So it's always giving on some level. I'm not saying everybody, but the archetype is giving and thinking of others. And it's like Baba saying, this is for you. And Mara, in a way, although I feel Mara is also for me, but for women, it's like Baba saying, this is for you. And I think that Baba, I don't think we can project too much of our own stuff on, say, Baba not letting men touch Mara, or even see Mara up until that one time before he dropped his body, the year before he dropped his body. But you think of the Me Too movement now and all that, and it was to me, it's as if Baba was saying, you have to have my permission before you can touch her. Or you have to have, in effect, her permission before you can touch her. And there is a sense that, I grew up in the world as it is, that almost that women belong to you. You can take a lot of liberties because, and I don't mean extreme, grotesque liberties, but it's like Baba's saying, no, this has to be with permission. Now, what I was going to share of my own life was, for the first 9 years of my life before my father died, I was born into, it's the 1950s, and born definitely into a world in which these very outlined male and female roles were outlined. And it was, I don't know that I consciously thought about it, but it was very uncomfortable. And I knew that I had to try and adapt to that, to be what a man's supposed to be. And I remember after my father died, I had a friend, Tony Passamonte, and I played the guitar and he was learning the guitar, and the Beatles came out, and we'd go up to my bedroom and I would be John and he would be Paul, and we'd be doing the Beatles songs and stuff. And we were really good friends. We'd come out and everybody would ask for our autographs and we'd give it to them. They were mocking, but we would hang out, and at some point we were playing a guy game, where you punch the other guy in the arm and then he punches you in the arm, and who can take it and who can punch harder. And all of a sudden we get a call. My mother gets a call from his parents, and we go over there, and he had a big black and blue mark on his arm, and they didn't want him playing with me anymore. Now, we were just hanging out with me, but granted, my father had died. I probably had a lot of pent-up anger, but this is what men do. They express it like this, and they both punch each other. And I never was the same after that. It was like a line had been crossed that I never meant to cross. The other thing is, women have always been so important in my life. And astrologically, my moon, which is one of the two feminine planets, touches every other planet and key point in my chart, and Venus rules most of my chart. So when I was 2-3 years old, my mother would work part of the year. My father worked, and my mother worked part of the year. And this Irish woman, whose name was Josie James, but they would say this is Aunt Josie. They they call aunts anyone. And so I knew her as Annie. And I vividly remember her husband had TB, and he was in Arizona in a sanatorium, and her daughter was dating sailors. So I was the place where she got to express all the love that was in her heart. And I can still see this smiling Irish eyes. And she sat me down at the piano. I remember first time at a piano, she had a piano and I'm picking out melodies. And now just go fast forward to Baba dropped his body in 1969. I went on a search that year, came to Baba a year later, and somewhere in 1970, I instantly fell in love, like at first sight. It was a mutual thing with with someone I met at a Baba meeting. We had talked briefly before the meeting, and then after Kenmore's talk, people would hug, and I embraced her, and I don't know what the hell happened, but I literally lifted her off the ground and swung her around the room. It did not, something happened and it suddenly was over. But the love that I felt for this woman was it's still there. It's a life-changing thing. Well, when I get to India for the first time, the end of January of 1972, first we met Alibi, and then we went to the veranda, and there's Mani greeting people. And when I got up to Mani and hugged Mani, it was this most extraordinary experience, because it was like I was hugging Annie, Alicia, that girlfriend, and Baba, all rolled into one. And it was all still Mani, you know. And then meeting Mara. You know, Mara is to women as in a way as Baba is to men, which I mean by which I mean to say, yes, she is all this in terms of female qualities, but she's also something way more. And you knew in her presence, you know, men couldn't get prasad from her hand, but so you'd go and stand like this, and she'd drop it. And I remember her going like, boop. or glancing at me, and my whole mind blanking out at one point with a flash of light. So the importance of women in my life with Baba has been, and especially with the Mandali. Now, on the other hand, I've had to learn, and I'm even learning now, the way that you could, like, women are not just different kinds of guys, you know. It's like what might, that I need to totally put myself into her experience in terms of what will please or make her happy. It's and then I find it's what fills my heart at the same time. But it's having to, I mean, it's not enough to incorporate feminine values. It's actually making the leap to say, what is she in her own experience, and to try and intuitively, empathetically grasp that. And it's challenging. It's challenging. The better I get, the happier I am. But it's very challenging. So Baba did, the only other thing that came, this is a little non sequitur about, I remember Kenmore talking about, in terms of women's role in the world, Sarosh's daughter wanted to be a flight attendant. Sarosh was one of the early close Mandali. And Sarosh was not a good Parsi girl from a good Parsi family, doesn't go out to work. And she took it to Baba, and Baba said, yes, I approve. And it was one of the first women who were able to break that barrier in India. So Baba he did open up a lot of doors. Now women have to balance too, and it's way beyond my pay grade to figure out how that works. Valuing, you know, but yeah, Baba did a wonderful thing to awaken us both to seek our own wholeness, to grasp our own wholeness by letting go of what we have kind of thought we had to assimilate, you know. That's it. Jai Baba.
I know, I appreciate so much of what you said. And I think you actually said something really important at the end, that, you know, women have to do some work too. It's not like, you know, all men have to figure out how to be like women. There's plenty, you know, if you look at the negative, just like the masculine, there are negative qualities of the feminine, right? Like, you know, grasping or guilting, sort of guilting for that. I mean, the masculine holds protection and the feminine holds nurturance, right? But when the feminine doesn't have protection, it can use nurturance in a negative way. Or if the masculine doesn't feel nurtured, it can become overprotective, right? And not allow that nurturance to get in. And so there's work and healing on both sides that I think the world is happening. But, you know, just society, women have been taught to become more like men. And personally, in my generation, I actually see an absence of the feminine, right? I think that even though the gender roles in the world as they were not appropriate, I do think the feminine was dismissed in a lot of ways. But there's some shift that's happening where the feminine is getting discounted entirely by women, but women too, right? And something that I, as a woman, and I love being a woman too. Like I'm a woman who loves being a woman. But what I always appreciated about the female Mandali is that even though they were these very spiritual beings, they did dress really beautifully. They were very into their clothes. I mean, of course, when Baba wanted them to give it up, they gave it up. But they were not these austere women who, walked around in burqas, right? They made their own clothes because they liked the Western styles. And I was reading recently this excerpt from, I believe it was Mara My Hair, but maybe not, maybe it was Monty's book. Anyway, talking about watching Mara comb her hair and how Mara loved her dark, beautiful hair. She would have happily cut it off for Baba, but she loved it for beauty's sake. And I think that's important, that the feminine doesn't exist for purpose of achievement. It just exists to make the world a more beautiful and loving place, which is why it gets discounted so much in the world as we know it, because it's all about productivity. And, that's a whole other conversation. But I mean, I guess, does that spark anything for anybody else? Just thinking, or even experiences of the female Mandali and what that was like. Let's see, am I gonna have to, maybe.
Can I say something?
Oh, yes, you can.
What's up, everybody? Hey. I'm having this like strong feeling to share this thing, that my experience of the women Mandali is that they were very, I mean, this is a generalization and I would actually exclude Mara from this, but I would say by and large, kind of like non-binary in a lot of ways. Like I don't experience the memories of many of, I think Arnavas was extremely kind of classically feminine and soft natured and things like that. And I mean, I'm sure didn't know all of the Mandali or meet all of them, but my experience of them is like very natural blend of masculine and feminine qualities. And I do think that our perception of masculinity and femininity here in the West is very skewed by our patriarchal upbringing that we've had for so many generations. And we see things in this binary that maybe isn't as pervasive in like Indian culture per se, or in other cultures. It's something that has actually traveled around the world and solidified itself in a certain way. And that's just like kind of what I wanted to drop in there. And that I feel that Baba was very, very non-binary too. He was so fierce in these like classically masculine ways with the way that he just traveled around everywhere and was so fiery and so intense and could like, do all this stuff that we sort of more identify as being more masculine or more male. And then on the other side, just like there's that picture of him where he's like holding his hair like this. And do you know this image that I'm talking about? And it's so beautiful. And he looks like a beautiful woman, and he's, because gender is like this experience, and he talks about it in discourses. It's like, it's not real. It's just part of the experiences of humanity. It's like part of the beautiful, real illusion that we're all, going through. So I just wanted to kind of drop that in there, and that like one of the, oh yeah, and like just how strong and powerful and leaderly and fierce like the women Mandali were. And we're not like, some of the things I think that we get caught up in our lives is just like regular folks on the path is like, and just not on the path, is being bound by the identity of like being a woman or being a man or being this race or that thing. And it's like just to have their example of like, oh my God, like he called Erich his mummy, like I love that so much, because Erich is like the guy. And he was so caring and so tender and so sensitive. And I like to think about them as as our kind of our guiding light in terms of breaking down some of these like gender stereotypes that we hold within ourselves, you know, and that we can find, like somebody was saying, just ways to orient ourselves towards more naturalness, just our humanity is complex, you know, and like as we free ourselves from more of these things, like how Baba has laid out so perfectly and beautifully for us, that we can hold each other in more wholeness, you know, and allow each other to be the spectrum of who we are. And, you know, I just think that that's really cool. And we're all just bouncing around back and forth from this body to that body. Like, it's not real, but it is, but it isn't, you know. That's what I have to share right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm so glad you came on and you shared. I always love what you have to share. And you bring so much truth. Makes me really, just so you guys know, Adrienne's one of my best friends in the whole wide world.
Well, I'm cutting an onion, but I'm right here. I'm just gonna go back to chopping my food. Listening to you all.
All right, let's go to Tony.
Yeah, this is just a quick one from what Adrienne was saying about Baba can look very feminine sometimes. And when that girlfriend, Alicia, her name was, she's probably passed on already, but when she disappeared, I came across at some point this photo of Baba, this wonderful single photo of Baba that reminded me of her. His eyes, his skin, his hair, the plaid sort of sweater he was wearing. And that became my Baba picture for a long time. It became my Alicia Baba picture. So this was like uniting that love that I still felt with my love for Baba. Because Baba did have that. He did have every facet. Yeah. And it's a weird thing to share, but
I appreciate the openness. We all do.
Can I have, right, sorry, can I just finish one? Just sorry to cut in line again. Elisa Genovese told me that money told her, okay, so so that's that. Like, I don't know how accurate this is, but she told me this, that I guess somebody asked Money like what it was like being women around him, or something about just like this gender conversation. And Money said, as per Lisa, oh, well, we never thought of him as a man. He was one of us. And I just think that's pretty cool.
Wow. Beautiful. Thanks, Adrienne. Okay, let's go to Rich.
Well, I've been writing down a few little tidbits because I've been thinking about this general topic for years and years, mostly due to my own dysfunction and contrariness and conflicts. But one of the things I wanted to say for sure was I read I call her Gulnar, but Gulmay's book, and she introduces who she is with Baba at the beginning of that book. And I mean, talk about male patriarchy. She got slammed by the Zoroastrian community hard. And I mean, I couldn't have taken something like that, but she just stuck with it because she knew Baba was the avatar. And it's a real interesting book to read because it really points out how absolutely important she was to Baba's work. The mother of Adi and, you know, can't quite get his name now, but Adi K. Anyway, moving on, I'm a big fan as of 4 or 5 years ago of the World Cup. And when I watched the women play in France, I was just elated every game I watched. And I'm watching every time I can now. It's a little weird, but they are so competent. They're so competent. They are amazing. They're incredible athletes. They're just amazing, but they're also, you know, pretty attractive women. And what I mean by that is they are working that feminine energy into the world consciousness. I think it's the thing. It is the thing. But anyway, I had a friend who was an astrologer. He was the first one to point out me a significant psychological difference that I could grasp as a concept. But he said that women, more than anything, have we energy and men have I energy. And that's a big thing. It's a very difficult thing. It's big. But that's a big thing I see. The one other thing in my life that I've tried to become aware of, this is a tough one. I bet this is tough for most men, but women cannot carry the burden or the work of a man's, what you can call anima, the female side. In a relationship, women cannot carry that. That's dysfunctional. And so women no longer have to devote themselves in a relationship to being, to taking care of me, That doesn't work. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah. I was hesitant to tap into this because I don't want to make this like an astrology conversation, but part of what the work that I do is I'm an astrologer, and my entire work has been creating the practice of feminine astrology, which is so cool because it's something that like we never have had in the past. And so there's these asteroids. Anyway, it's just amazing to see. The reason this topic is so interesting is to me because it's like my hands-on work of working with tons and tons of women to read their charts from a feminine perspective, because historically astrology has only had two feminine archetypes, which were roles that women played in men's lives, which were the moon and Venus, the mother and the lover. But over the last like 150 years or so, they've actually discovered all of these new archetypes that are in the sky, but they're still not being used. And the reason I mention it is because it coincides with Baba's advent, and it also lends validity to the other archetypes of the feminine, right? Like that exist outside of the lover of the man or the mother of the man. You have like the warrior archetype and all of these things that are coming to the forefront, where women in society are coming to power, right? And not power as in overpowering, but I just think it's so incredible the way that, women are being seen in the world in a way that maybe not ever. There have been matriarchal societies, but in a very, very, very long time, women are being liberated in a way that they haven't. But let's see if I can. We're at 8 o'clock, so we don't have to keep going. I just find this conversation very, very interesting, and I'm so happy to all who have jumped in. Let's see if I can call on anybody. It hasn't. Go ahead. Do you have any thoughts?
It's just been fascinating listening to all of you, and I love the passage that you read earlier, Margi. That sort of covers it so beautifully. The influence of the female to the male in this advent, and especially in the last 100 years, we've seen the change of the the enhancement of women, if you will, how much they have been liberated, how much they have come more to the forefront, and that's all part of Baba's work. And he certainly, through the Women Mandli and through the Western women that came to him, have taken such long strides in making women come to the forefront and have that influence on the male population, and therefore come to that balance, if you will. And I think that's phenomenal. So that's just generally, and personally speaking, of course, I've had relationships with some of the Women Mandli over the years, but because we were in Pakistan and they were in India, not so closely. But of course, I was named by Baba for my namesake, Dr. Gohar, which is a story in itself, and I won't go into all the details, but so very close connection with her. And then Mani, after the 1962 East-West gathering, where I was only not even eight years old at the time, or close to 8, 7.5, whatever. So seeing Baba for the first time, going through that whole, getting drenched at the first day of the Sabas with all the Western women, having been called inside to Guru Prasad, and then Mani giving me her dress to wear, and then subsequently sending me that dress mailing it to me to our home in Karachi, which I still have as one of my most treasured possessions. And then, just the other day, it struck me, I was like, why in heck did I not ask her all the other times that I met her? What made her send me that dress? I mean, I still don't know why she sent it to me. Was it just a whim on her part to, send it to me as a memento, or did Baba ask her to send? And I said, why did I not ask her that? I so regret that now. But anyway, one of my subsequent visits, I even wore the dress to her, because when she gave it to me in 62, I was all of 3 feet tall. And so the dress was very long, and she had tied it with a blue ribbon to, so that I wouldn't trip. But now I was grown, of course, in the 90s when I went to revisit, and I took the dress with me, and I actually wore it and, met Money. And so that was a beautiful moment. Mira, of course, many times. I sang for her when I was little in 65, I think it was, at the 65 darshan, when Baba told us after we met with him and took his darshan, he said, now go and be with the women. And so we were there. And then, of course, Mira, as always, asks any children who come to her to sing for her. And I was petrified because I was so shy, so introverted. But the first song that popped into my head, which we had just learned in school, was Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. So that's what I sang for her, just the first few bars of that, because I was so shy. So, and then years later, when I was there on one of my trips, pregnant with my second child, who was a son. He's a grown father of 2 now. But Mira putting her hand on my stomach and looking at Baba's picture and saying a prayer, or I don't know what she said to him, but she was communing with him while placing her hand on my stomach, which was a very special moment. So these are a few of my recollections of the Women Monday. But yeah, it's definitely so blessed, and so, what can I say? Definitely blessed to be this close in his orbit this time around. Jai Baba.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you shared that. That's so beautiful. Those are really valuable stories. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go to Lauren.
Oh, I just wanted to tell Gloria, thank you for sharing that. It's incredible. But something that came to mind, Margie, when you were talking about loving being a woman, I think that rings true for me, and it's taken a lot of years of deconditioning, I guess, if you think about it, and just going through intense, very masculine dominant career path. And I feel like Baba's, the way I receive Baba is like just the sweetest energy that I can, ever imagine. It's hard to even explain, as I'm sure you guys understand. But for me, something that's come into my life recently is just that there's nothing I like more than just to make things beautiful. And it's just like, I like that, and I'm gonna just own it, and it brings me so much joy. And I think women like doing that, but they're not necessarily encouraged to do that, or that it's like what you said earlier, Margie, that it's not something that's valued very highly in our society. And so for me, there's a connection there to what Baba brings out of people, which is just like sweetness beyond imagination. And so there's beauty in that kind of just sweetness, and that kind of just desire to make things more beautiful, and more comfortable and more inviting, nourished, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's such an amazing point, because yeah, it's not women, it's the feminine, right? And that can exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, like
exactly.
men can embody that, just like music, that's an aspect of the feminine, right? And
Absolutely.
one of the most beautiful things, and I think a responsibility that women, you know, like in the female body have, is to encourage that in men, right? You know, and celebrate that and lift that up as much as, you know, we need to be lifted up for that. We also need to lift the masculine up for protecting that, and then also celebrate them to do the same. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. But also, you know, something that happens when the combination of the masculine and the feminine come together is like ballet, right? That wouldn't exist. Ballet is so structured and disciplined and exact and precise and achievement focused, but it's also beautiful. And so that's an incredible product that when the two come together, you know, that's what the world can be, is this exquisitely beautiful performance for him. Priya, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you raised your hand. I was
Everyone.
waiting for you to speak.
It's wonderful to see everybody. I've been listening for a bit, and I must say that some of the conversations have just, that's something a little raw within me, but in a good way. And I'm really glad that you chose this topic for today. Truly, it's very, very courageous. You know, in my experience of embodying our feminine or our masculine, I've come to realize that, like what Alan said, not Alan, Adrienne, about patriarchy. Yes, we are all byproducts of patriarchy, not just us, even our ancestors. You and I can today go out in the world and work and make money, but probably our grandparents were not allowed to do that. So when the women in our lineage have been suppressed or abused or denied or not allowed to be who they are, you know, when their power is disregarded, it leads to a trauma. And I believe that it comes, it could come from both the paternal as well as the maternal side. And thus, me as a woman am not the only one to sort of inherit it, but so are my siblings, even male siblings. So when we say that women are more loving and more nurturing, like what you said, that, but women have also gone very masculine. Yeah, that is essentially the side effect of making up for it, right? Similarly, I would say that I have come across a lot of men who one may perceive to be extremely feminine. So that's probably the imbalance that one often sees in the world. But when I look at the Baba community, I feel that Baba has softened our edges, which is nice, which is not to say that that we have all learned to embody and are truly in touch with our divine feminine or divine masculine. But Baba has definitely softened the edges. And the last thing I wanted to say was that while people share about their experience of being with the women monthly, in my experience of being with Baba, I find Baba far more feminine than Mera or Mani or any women monthly. I see a womb in Baba. When I need a safe space, that's the place where I go to. And I think it really depends, right? Like the truth is really very, very personal. Whether God is male or female, because intellectually anything can be said. But in our own personal experience, it is what it matters. I mean, if you have a mind like a Christ, you would say God is my father. And if you have a mind like Mera, you would say God is my lover. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. You spoke so beautifully. Yeah, thank you. And I love saying about, you know, you find a womb in Baba. That's so beautifully said. Thank you.
Jai Baba, everyone.
Thank you, Baba. Let's go on to Rich.
Well, some of this bringing up some more thoughts for me. I like to express these things because I don't get to do it with most people in my life, or very few. But one of the things I've become about 2 years ago, it just started hitting me in the face, and that's there's a daycare, a nursery, like, oh, less than 100 yards from my house. And they walk these 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds to the park and back in front of my house. And it's so stunning because there's just nothing else like that in the world. And it's reminded me every one of those children has gestated in the womb of a woman. I mean, you know, without women, I mean, women, it's such a responsibility getting pregnant, just bringing kids into the world. And I see it as a great responsibility, along with the husbands or the fathers as well as the children. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I guess a year ago, I got exposed to Adrienne Chamazd there singing from the August 22 Southeast Gathering or something. And I was so stunned. I watched it several times. And to me, she has this remarkable energy of being able to bring that total femininity into that extraordinary, like Sufi praise of Baba, of God. Just incredible. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that really is. But, you know, because I know Adrienne, I hope it's okay that I'm saying this, Adrienne, but because I know her intimately, you know, what we see is the beautiful feminine expression that she is on stage. But a lot of people don't know this, but Adrienne has spent years perfecting her craft, right? You know, to us, we just see a really pretty singer, but she's put so much of the masculine behind the feminine, right? And that's what that balance really is. You know, I always say when Adrienne sings, the fourth plane opens up and somehow comes out of her throat. But but I'm really glad you mentioned that. And maybe Adrienne, I'll say something now, or she'll just hide away and be like, oh, not me.
My things are cooking over here. That was very kind of you to say that, Richard and Margie. Thank you both for honoring me. And I am very masculine in the way that I maneuver through the world. And I do think that, like, when I kind of get dropped into that performance space, it's like something else happens. So that's cool. Thank you for saying kind things about me. I really appreciate that.
Love you, Adrienne. Well, I have very much enjoyed this conversation. I hope everybody else has, even if, like, every time you see something about female empowerment, you think about Baba. I don't know if you guys have seen the new Barbie movie, but it's I actually highly recommend seeing it because it is a total female empowerment, excuse my French, but fuck you to the patriarchy. Because everybody kind of goes into the movie thinking, oh, it's going to be this Barbie movie, how we know it. And it's all about how Barbie is basically like, just how the only reason that Barbies had to be Barbie is because men have been the way they are. And that, you know, in basically the Barbie world is a matriarchal society. And then she gets brought into the real world and the patriarchy. And she's like, all of a sudden I'm self-conscious. And it's a really, really well done movie, but I love it because it makes me think about Baba, because I'm like, wow, maybe this is part of Baba's work, the Barbie movie. Baba's hiding in the Barbie movie. But anyway, I think with that, we can probably close it up unless anybody else has any other thoughts that are last things that they want to share or insights from this conversation, or maybe requests for me to never do conversations like this again. No, I'm just kidding. But on that note, I prefaced it last week, but if you're listening to the recording or here, next week I want to talk about, you know, kind of what Baba has said about homosexuality and the role that it's playing, and just continue this conversation into the fluidity of gender. And I just came off the Usahavas, which I've said multiple times now, but there is so much in this younger generation that's happening with gender fluidity, and they don't even see gender. And, you know, I think I grew up in a time where I didn't see color. That was very acceptable, right? I've never grown up with racism when maybe an older person has. It was just, I mean, not that it's not there, but in school, it wasn't like, oh, I can't be friends with this person because they're Black. We didn't really see color. But now the kids, they don't see gender. They simply don't. And I think it's so interesting talking about that and the impact that it's having, even being so much of a part of the Baba world, because we've had to change some of the ways that we do the Usahabas, for example, to cater to what the kids are asking for. So my plan is to ask a guest to come on from the Usahabas and help talk about this. But you guys have that to look forward to for next week. Well, I guess with that, we can have a moment of silence, and then we'll do 3 Avatar Mayor Baba Ki Jays.
Before you sign off, I just want to say, you got ovaries, lady. And
I really appreciate you saying that, because I was like, I might leave my body for this conversation because I don't know where it's going to go. And so I appreciate everybody who participated and made it a very loving, warm, and accepting environment. But okay, so let's have a moment of silence and then we'll all unmute. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher
Baba Ki Jai.
Avatar
Mayor Baba.
Hey.
Mayor Baba Ki Jai.
Hey Baba, everybody.
Hey, Baba. Thank you.
Thank
night.
you.
Everybody.
Jai Baba.